Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Uh, Reviewing, of course, the Samkhya Karika. This is a philosophical system that is part of the six Orthodox schools based off the Vedas. If you have not, watched or studied this before, then go back to the very first one. Right, I got these passages in Pranayama um, show, if you will. Some of the ones in the past had nothing to do with Samkhya Karika, so certainly go back to verse 1. So we're on 12 now. So let's go back 12 episodes and you'll check it out. Okay. So last week we started to touch on the gunas, right? And a guna essentially in this philosophical system is like a quality, right? It's a quality that everything that is in material nature, right? In Prakriti, right, that has become manifest, has a quality to it, right? And those qualities are of three different types. Sattva, which is like kind of like harmonic. Let me use the words Gaudapada uses here of pleasure. You have rajas. Rajas is very dynamic, passionate, and here he describes it as pain. And then tamas. Right? And tamas is inert, and heavy, and in like, this case describes it as delusion, which is really appropriate, right? Because we want to think about it in terms of like kind of like mental states. Okay, so let me get into the actual translation of Karika 12, the attributes of the nature of pleasure, pain, and delusion. They are adapted to illuminate, to activate, and restrain. They mutually suppress, support, produce, consort, and exist. All right. So I think I wrote in the description, right? They kind of one can't really exist without the other. So again, they mutually suppress, support, produce, consort, and exist. And maybe I expand on that in a few moments. But first, we look at the qualities as they are described here in this translation, that of pleasure, pain, and delusion. Sattva of pleasure. Yeah, I like to use the translation harmony, right, or balance. Is it any more or less accurate? Not exactly, but I think kind of captures, ultimately what we might be seeking. Now, again, we also have to, well, if sattva, right, balance and harmony is something that we want in our lives, right, then that is something, of course, that we have to seek out. But we also have to understand, right, they mutually support one another. Again, one cannot exist without the other. Thus, we have the ups and downs of life. Um, there are certain ways, of course, that we can mitigate the effects of rajas, right? That pain and tamas, delusion. There are certain ways that we can do that, and certainly within this philosophical system as well as others. We have tools that we could use, of course, to overcome um, this pain and delusion, and really maybe reside in the place of sattva more often. I mean, it's like a game, right? It's like a game. It's like the congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks, right? I want to say it's a 7 game series, but it's more like it's a game every single day. It's a game every single moment, right? And in some respect, one of those gunas that are imposed upon us is going to win out, and it's all about kind of being like the Milwaukee Bucks, right? Winning in 6 games, right? 4-2, if you will. I suppose it'd be a lot better if we can sweep the series, right? 4-zip. But that oftentimes doesn't happen. Again, they're going to mutually exist, so you cannot have one without the other. Okay, so getting back to like some of the very basic concepts, though, right? This idea of pleasure, or if you're a yoga practitioner, you almost want to think about it as sukha, right? Of a state of ease, right? And it's the place where we want to be. One thing to note, I think that's so important, is that we can't be attached to the idea of being in that state. Right? If we're attached to the idea, then suffering will certainly come. Right? Pain will come. Rajas will come in that deep desire to have life kind of permanently balanced. There's no doubt that pain's going to come because you're going to be constantly seeking something that we should come to terms with. That is, it fluctuates, right? And a lot of times we don't have control over it. All right. So it goes on. Remember the attributes of the nature property of pleasure, pain, and delusion. They are adapted to illuminate, to activate, and to restrain. So their effects upon us are to illuminate, right? Um, to remove that delusion. Maybe that's a limiting definition in this idea of illumination, right? To bring about pleasure by way of not, as we will come to find out, the others diminish once one becomes dominant. There's no doubt about that. That's the way the gunas operate. Um, but this idea of diminishing pain and delusion through illumination are again achieved by certain practices like meditation, pranayama, right? Uh, Mindfulness, self-awareness, um, generally the practices of yoga. Okay, but to illuminate, right? Once we're in that state of sattva, right, we become illumined, right? We become um, awakened to the things around us, and it's important that we take note of that as well. It's also important that we take note of those other states, right? Active, and we become restrained. Is a kind word to use here for sure. Lethargic, I think, would be the word I would use for tamas, where we just feel dull. Right, dull is another good descriptor for tamas. This idea of like delusion, or maybe another good word to use there instead of delusion is like confusion. Like, reminds me of those. I think they're called like many options studies. It's when they put out a limited amount of jelly, right? Like jarred jelly in a supermarket, and sales went up, but then they like loaded up the shelves with like over 50 or something crazy like that, a variety of jellies, and then sales actually went down. Of course, in life we have many options, but we can't get the mind too tied up in the multitude, right? We have to keep things as simple as possible, right? And the simpler things are, generally the easier things become, and thus, of course, pleasure might come. Okay, so again, they are adapted to illuminate, to activate, and to restrain. And again, these are the qualities that are kind of like imposed upon mind and body. They're not, if you're familiar with the doshas, they're not too unlike the doshas, but they're not, right? They're not the doshas. We should not confuse those two, right? One is an Ayurvedic, part of the Ayurvedic system. This in Samkhya and in yoga and in I don't know what other school might use it, but in any case, the gunas, in Vedanta for sure, describe the qualities that are inherent in all things, including us. And this is why I bring up the doshas, because the doshas, they kind of describe these balances just a little bit differently, but how they manifest in mind and body. And that is exactly what happens here with the gunas as well. But we must also understand that happens right in nature. This happens naturally, but we can kind of like augment it as well. Now, going on, they mutually suppress and support, produce, consort, and exist. Again, one can't exist without the other. Well, let's just come to terms with that. They mutually suppress one another. So when one becomes dominant, the other two become suppressed. Right? If we want to live a sattvic kind of life, then we learn to both slow down and know when to be active at the right times. They also mutually support one another, as I mentioned, right? They have to exist with one another. So, it's not like they're opposites necessarily. They kind of are, I mean, especially Rajas and Tamas. Um, but they in kind of describing these qualities, since they cannot exist without one another, they support one another in that existence. They also produce one another, which I think is a really kind of cool way to look at things. Right. So if you have, harmony, right, within harmony, right, within this balanced state of sattva, within it is contained rajas and tamas, pain and delusion, or let's say activity and restraint, right? And the same, of course, is true with this idea of like restraint, right? It being in the state of restraint, there is also the qualities, although they might be suppressed, of activity and harmony. And the same, of course, is true with rajas of activity and harmony. And the same, of course, is true with rajas of activity. There is also the qualities of restraint. There is, as well as illumination or harmony. Okay. Well, that's a quick primer on the Gunas, and of course, we will get more into that. The last few weeks, um, we've been going through some Qigong sets. We're going to continue that. Right? Might as well. Right? Let me see. We did like we've been doing a lot of stuff, of course, with the arms. That's a lot of the seated Qigong practices involve arms. And of course, as we move the arms, the capacity of the lungs goes up. So what we'll do today, maybe we just keep it very simple, okay? Do this. Okay. Very, very simple. Inhaling up, exhaling down. All right, it's going to be inhaling up, palms up, exhaling down. Super simple, very basic. We're sitting soft, jaw relaxed, hands resting into your lap. Let's just first inhale and exhale. Inhaling, arms rise, palms rise. Exhale, lower. Inhaling, arms rise. Exhale, lower. Inhaling, arms rise. Exhale, lower. Inhale, rise. Exhale, lower. Inhale, rise. Exhale, lower. Inhale, rise. Exhale, lower. Inhale, rise. And exhale, lower. Resting your hand into your lap. Shoulders back, chin down, chest up. Slight hollow to the belly. Breathe deeply. And keep your mind focused on your breath. Move to an exhale. Deep inhale, shoulders rise. And exhale through your mouth. Roll your shoulders back and down. Cool. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Please keep up your practice, right? If you can, of course, that subscribe button, like button, it always helps, okay? In the meantime, keep up your practice, all right? And be sure you do what you can to help yourself and others. Peace.